Carter. How much money has the county spent on this TED, as far as trying to get it out there? Is that transparency in those numbers, or those numbers out there?
I'm trying to remember, I mean, that was before I was here, and I remember sitting out in the audience, and was it 30-ish?
No,
I can't,
the county, the only money we've spent is what Nicole has spent on advertising.
Okay.
MBAC paid
Oh, that's right,
to hire
That's
Janet Cornish.
that's right.
So the county, whatever the advertising has been, has really, and copies, has really been the extent of the cost for the county, correct me if I'm wrong.
That's correct. There's a memorandum of understanding between the county and MBAC, and if this district is to be successful and generates increment, and if all the other obligations for infrastructure are paid, then the county will reimburse MBAC for my time. But it would only come out of the increment, not out of the general fund,
So
but
if
to
this doesn't happen, then MBAC doesn't get
paid back.
paid?
Correct.
Okay. One of the other questions I had is, and it just left my head, is that fast? I'll just say that for another time. Thanks.
Thank you.
I've got another question to go with that.
Yes.
So the statement of infrastructure is what's attracting business. Infrastructure is what attracted every homeowner on that into the county. That infrastructure isn't Broadwater infrastructure. That infrastructure is Gallatin County and Three Forks infrastructure. So is there a motion to is there a TED for, housing that we can start applying that same taxation level to all the houses and everything that's being developed out there right now to support what they need for school development, for increased EMS, just to get the bridge fixed on Old Town Road? That thing's been closed down to EMS and first responders because of weight limits and nobody wants to claim it. Broadwater doesn't list it on their bridge site, Gallatin doesn't list it on theirs. I mean, if that's what we're talking about is infrastructure, taxation to build infrastructure, or whatever it was, infrastructure to attract people, that is what has attracted everybody to that end of Broadwater County. You've got the school, you've got the community, you've got the EMS, and you've got the support, but it's not coming from Townsend, it's not coming from, Winston, it's not coming from anything other than those folks that we're leveraging out of Three Forks.
Well, let me ask this question, Matt. Let's say that the TED's not being developed and the growth continues. What's your plan?
What's my plan?
I mean, how would we continue to fund the fire department and the school? I mean, it'd be the process that's in place currently, right?
No, it's the same piece. It's what is the plan? And that's, I guess, a question to,
I don't know.
that's kind of your guys' point of the plan. Now, I'd come up with it, it's the same thing. If we're gonna do a TED, then, and I'm a property owner out there, the tax burden now has to fall on the property owners. Those mills need to be kind of equivalent. On the Gallatin County side mill, if my mill for my $100,000 home is gonna cost me $1,000 in taxes, then my mill and my $100,000 in Broadwater should be getting the same amount to the schools, to the fire, to whatever, of the county that's supporting them, of that school district. And it's not making it there. It's not equivalent because your mill isn't the same as a Gallatin County mill.
And that's-
You know?
We can't change that.
So
We can't change that, that's set by state statute.
it sounds like if we can change it for a commercial zoning district, why, and you just said, who was it that just said that you could create that same mill levy for fire support and everything like that? I can't remember, I wrote it down. I come up with it. Using a mill levy deliberately targeted at those people at that end of Broadwater County.
Passed by the voters.
Passed by the voters.
Passed by the voters,
So
in
this doesn't have to
actuality-
be passed by the voters. So the voters can say, all this tax income that's gonna come in and go to this zone, this TED, you guys get to decide if that money comes into to Broadwater County at the expense of the actual voters that live in Broadwater County. But the voters are the ones who have to decide, oh man, those guys get a full tax break and now I have to pay the tax burden to support the schools, fire and EMS infrastructure that I actually moved here to get, while we increase traffic increase everything in that end of the county without them paying their fair share towards fire, EMS, schools, and the community around them. All their employees, everybody else that floats around there, enjoy it. But they don't get, they pay taxes, it just doesn't go to that. So, I mean, they are paying their fair share for something else. So it's, that's my take on infrastructure attracting business. It attracts residents too, and the residents should get their fair shake. Both should be voted on the same way.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
May you bring up some really important points, and I think I'd like to just take a minute. The number of mills that are levied, if you have a property in Broadwater County, the number of mills that are levied is a combination of the school levy, the county levy, the state levy, and all the various districts that are, the fire and so forth. That doesn't change when you create a TED. The number of mills levied doesn't change.
Yes.
The only thing that changes is that you have more value, the value of the mill goes up, but you're only levying against an increase in taxable value. If someone has a $20,000 house, they pay fewer taxes than someone with a $100,000 tax.
Yes.
It's just the same mills.
I understand.
So we're not. The second thing you brought up is that Montana allows urban renewal districts to have housing in them, and housing then benefits, but housing in general doesn't create enough new taxes to really pay for infrastructure. You yourself, when you're paying $1,000 tax bill, that's a lot, versus a company that might pay several $100,000 in taxes. So actually, to have a viable enough money to actually pay for infrastructure, it typically has to have
Yes, that's why
commercial and
generally we
industrial.
lay out proper impact fees and all those other things that
That's
grow
correct.
towards infrastructure.
That's correct.
Yes.
So I wanted to.
understand the process
Okay,
completely.
okay, all right,
I'm
so,
just,
yeah, and it's.
that entire end of Broadwater County has exploded, and I would say honestly has exploded in the last 4 years, the amount of homes that have popped up.
Right, and the
Whether
county,
that's Price
right.
Road, Wheatland Meadows, and who knows what's gonna happen with
Now, I don't want to speak for the commission. I'm only going to tell you what the statute says. And that is that you could have a cooperative agreement where if you could establish what part of the budget, let's say for facilities, were used by Broadwater County. In other words, you allow for connecting infrastructure. So if you were to make improvements to a station in Three Forks, a facility to serve, and I say that the Wheatland TED was using 10% or 20% of your services, you can help contribute to that cost with a TED. But it would have to be aligned directly to some asset.
Okay.
So that's something, and I can't speak for the commission, I'm just telling you what the law says. That we've done this in other places where we've created sewer and water infrastructure outside of a district and brought that new infrastructure in, and that the TED can pay for that in proportion to the amount of it.
So who
that's
votes
used.
on how that TED pays for it? So if we're bringing in this TED that's gonna last 15 to 25 years, cause you can keep
Right.
adding on it, and go, I wanna build a sewer, you know what?
Yeah,
I
yeah,
wanna
you can
repave
never
this road
extend it.
more, I wanna do whatever. You can keep growing on what your debt is, and it'll extend
But
to pay
not,
the debt off.
right, but not after the 15 years. You have to get all the debt
If-
set by the end of the 15 years.
Okay, so you've amassed all your debt in 15 years. At the end of the 15 years, who gets to vote on what that debt amassing is? Is it the 7 people or the 7 current property owners in that area?
No,
that can
it's
subdivide?
all up to the commission.
Okay, so the commission has the ability to say, hey, this TED's attracting this much business and this many people, and you know what? We do need to help. Use money from the TED can be allocated towards the school because it's brought in this many
Well, no,
more
I wouldn't
people
say
to
the
community.
school, but there are some opportunities that if you could sit down and talk about it.
You could talk a metric of ambulance response, fire response, and otherwise.
could
and
look
say,
at
hey, we had 10% of our responses here, so 10% of whatever, you can actually come up with a metric and do it. But if it's attracting business, which is attracting residents, again, infrastructure attracts more.
But then those
How does that not
residents,
impact the school?
because the residents are gonna be paying taxes that don't go into the increment.
But they're not paying the same share. they're not paying their same share. They're not, a multi-million-dollar industry. Their mill, again, my $100,000 home versus a multi-million-dollar construction complex, the mill is the mill. I can pay 20 mills towards a school, which would be equivalent to half a mill of that complex. It's not the same. That's what,
Yeah, but
that's why I'm
it is,
asking.
yeah, the commission has the right to decide within the law, and I don't wanna get into the weeds on what the law says specifically, but there may be some opportunities to work together.
So what company, you represent MBEC?
No, MBEC is my client,
MBEC is your client?
Client.
Okay.
and I'm a community development specialist, and I was hired by MBEC to help the county go through the
MBEC is Broadwater
steps.
based?
It's an economic development, entity that's outside it's a separate entity from the county, but it serves as an economic development function for the county, if that's
Okay.
correct. Okay,
No, I'm just trying to make sure, the MBEC name sounds familiar and the people on board.
Montana Business
I've heard-
Assistance Connection
Yeah.
is the client who's assisting the county in going through this process. But it's
Okay.
through a memorandum of understanding, so that it is on behalf of the county.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I have a super quick question. Could this go to a vote of the residents instead of you three deciding? Is that legal? Is it, as far as the TED? Could the TED, yes or no, the vote, could it go to the residents instead of you three deciding the future of it?
I believe it can't, right? I think the commission has to make that
The
decision.
it is a commission responsibility.
I think another thing to consider too is that if this district is created, there'll be an advisory board, appointed from people in that area that will advise the commission on matters within the TED. So it's not gonna be just us making those decisions. We'll have an advisory board from folks in that area, so.
I just have a couple of questions, because I'm not real savvy in this area, so I just have some questions for you. So that money that you're going to be putting back into the infrastructure from the incremental gains,
Correct.
that money, most of our tax money is then taken care of by our county tax assessors, and it goes to the county. So this money, is it then controlled by Broadwater County? So let's say I put, the incremental gain is $100,000 that's gonna go back into who controls that money?
The commissioners,
Oh, the commissioners then, and they're the ones that put it back into,
into the infrastructure.
I get it.
But as Commissioner Folkford just mentioned, the counties can set up advisory boards if they'd like, and that advisory board in some places has included the school superintendent, so the schools can get involved in it. Again, the county has the final say on all the budgetary matters and policy matters, but sometimes people who have a specific interest in the future of the community can serve on those advisory boards. You have to be careful because being county residents versus
Well,
not,
and we're unique, it's a completely unique situation.
because
here.
you have that shared jurisdiction.
So it's Broadwater County, but we're a Three Forks district where we accept those students from that.
So,
It's-
if you can talk with the commissioners and express your interest in serving on that advisory board, and that way you can, bring your perspective, and I think that would be really worthwhile. So,
Thank you, that's all my.
Are we on the second agenda item, or are we still on the zoning?
Still,
I have a couple of questions. So I believe by state statute that the zoning district had to be approved by all the people in the zoning district. Have they all approved that?
I can answer that question too. Sorry to keep interrupting. There are two kinds of zoning districts. One is under, called Part 1 zoning, which, as you say, has to be initiated by the property owners. Part 2 zoning is zoning that is in support of the growth policy. So the growth policy, that's the master plan for Broadwater County, has indicated that this area is an area where commercial industrial development should occur. Based on that, the Montana statute allows for the zoning process that we have just gone through, which is to put out notice that it's going to be, that there's an intent to create this and allows a protest period. It does not have to be initiated by the property owners. The law that governs the creation of TEDs says you have to do this part 2 zoning, which is growth policy directed. So it's more, this is how Broadwater County envisions this area to grow as a commercial and industrial area. That's in your growth policy that it was adopted in 2003. And therefore, what the law says about creating urban renewal districts and TEDs is that you have to have it be zoned in accordance with the growth policy, so that triggers part 2. So there was not a requirement in this type of zoning for it to be initiated by the property owners. But I will say, the 7 property owners that are in the district are all aware of this zoning issue, and I know that members of the commission and of MBAC have been in touch with those property owners to discuss the implications for their properties, and property owners that did not want to be zoned actually, requested to be, taken out of the district, and they were. So the 7 ones remaining have agreed to do this.
Okay. And then my other question is, so if Bridger Brewing just buys the property and starts building, the school, the fire, and everybody in the area will be better off not in the TED, because they'll actually get more taxes because it'll be a commercial building going up, just like the Styrian, all the other businesses out there, Wheat Montana. So there's really no reason for a TED. They're better off, you just approve them to build, and then the school will get at least the taxes from them.
They can't build without the TED because the TED's going to pay for the infrastructure.
But they don't have to do the TED. They don't have to do a TED.
But how are they going to get their sewer system paid for?
They build their own
That
instead of putting everyone with it. So that's something for you guys to consider also. Thank you.
Any other comment?
Excuse me, Tim Ravendall, citizen taxpayer. Been following our local government for a long time. And one of the things that we've seen in the past, and I'm just bringing this up because it, to some extent, seems like it's going to happen again, where we have the cart before the horse, and then we got to back up and do it again. I've seen it many, many times, and I hope we don't see it again. My point that I'd like to have you really take a really close look at, and it was just talked about, and that is under the growth policy. We are operating this zoning type 2 under the current growth policy, but yet the planning board, the commission, the county planner, and everybody has been working with a contractor to develop a new growth policy. And that part of that process has not been, in my understanding and knowledge, been brought into this process to keep the people fully informed on where that growth policy is, because each time I've asked personally as a citizen, what is the status of the growth policy, it's under review. And that's all I hear. So without knowing any details, certainly a growth policy is going to have an impact on the creation of zoning, and it's going to have a creation of land use, and it's definitely going to impact private property. With that said, Commissioners, just please keep that in mind. Thank you.
Any other public comment? Yes, Joe.
Did you remember what you were gonna say?
I did, and I wrote it down. I did, but I had to write it down. It stinks being old. So I just wanted to clarification and understanding for my purposes on what the role of MBAC is in all of this. So can I ask that, and can that be explained?
I'll let Janet explain it. She's contracted by MDAC.
MBAC is, my understanding is that MBAC is a regional economic development organization. It assists both, I think, 3 counties, Lewis and Clark and Broadwater County. And it, in that role, it helps in a number of different ways. It helps secure grants for affordable housing. It works with businesses to recruit them to this three-county area. It provides, and as you mentioned, you even talked about the grant that for earlier that MBAC was helping you with. They help local communities write grants for public purposes. They have a mission that address the wide-ranging economic and community development needs of the three counties. Their role in this project was to work with Broadwater County in recruiting a value-adding business, in other words, a business that uses Montana resources and adds value. For many years, and for its history, Montana's been a resource state. And most of what happens here is that our resources go elsewhere and other people make money off of this. The legislature said, well, we need to start looking at ways which we can add value to Montana resources here. That's what Brewery essentially does that. It takes Montana ag products and improves their value. So MBAC has that mission to try to help with value-adding economic development, to help more of the wealth of these businesses stay locally. So to that end, MBAC in the county decided it might be a good idea to look at how a targeted economic development district could assist in that process. So by offering this ability to provide assistance to value-adding industries, MBAC chose to pursue this. It entered into a memorandum of agreement with Broadwater County to hire my firm to assist the county in doing this. And so all of the costs of my time and I have a colleague I work with on this, Lynette Windemaker. She and I have been working for Broadwater County, but through MBAC, and MBAC has paid, as we heard earlier, our entire fee, with the exception, or the cost of doing this, with the exception of the staff time devoted to our support and advertising. So, but their role is to support economic and community development activities in this three-county region.
And it's my understanding too, Commissioner Obert, that your husband, Brian Obert, works for MBAC in some way, shape, or fashion?
Brian Obert is the executive director of MBAC, yes.
And he's your husband?
Yes, he is.
Okay, thank you.
25 years this past September.
Hi, Thomas.
Yes,
I'm Barbara Mutter, and I represent Three Forks Area Ambulance. I have a couple of things to say. I worked with USDA Rural Development on a grant for the ambulance recently, and worked very close with Frank out of DIS in Gallatin County to get the accurate home count in South Broadwater County from mile marker 101 down south. And in Broadwater County currently, you have 883 homes under my care for ambulance response. I believe that you said, ma'am, that it would take years to catch up the tax base after the infrastructure is paid for. And I am very concerned. I've had many calls at this point, 3 in Broadwater County, where my ambulance was dispatched to a domestic or a suicide stage for law enforcement, and we did not get backup. My EMTs are volunteers. They do not wear bulletproof vests. These situations across the country are the worst situations to go into. I guess my point in this, I am not against development. I would just like to see if there is an avenue where we can look at some of that money that would go back in the infrastructure of the TED district that could be somehow funneled out, and some of those funds go to the school, go to the fire, and go to the police, go to Broadwater County Sheriffs. We're already behind. I can't wait 15 years for increased taxes. We need to look at this problem today. I don't want to bury anymore. I've buried two that were close to me, thank you very much. And I don't want to see any of my EMTs put in jeopardy with not having adequate law enforcement. And this growth, I think we're going to see even more growth. Broadwater County, the lower taxes, Gallatin County is getting what I just read in the newspaper, $300 a month. Those people are not gonna be able to afford Gallatin County houses, and they're coming. I don't think they're not coming, but I think we have to prepare. And I'm just wondering, is there some avenue of negotiations with this tax money that would go back? So I pay 62.8% of my tax bill goes to the school, and I very much back the school, all right? I'm not saying I'm paying too much. I'm in favor of the mill levy or the bond that we may need. The school is bursting at the seams, okay? But, so say this business comes in and they produce a tax of $100,000 a year. And it goes back to pay for their sewer system, which is what I read. I didn't read water, I read sewer only.
That's correct, that's
All
correct.
right? And then, but of that money, of that tax money, is there a way that we can sit down and negotiate that some of that portion of that, so 62.8% is my bill, so say they pay $100,000 in taxes, that's $60,000 in taxes back to the school. Is there a way to negotiate that maybe $30,000 of that taxes could go back into the school to build, and maybe a portion of that go to law enforcement in Broadwater County and go to fire? The ambulance at this time does not collect any tax money. I need to make that clear, that I didn't make that clear. I bill, and we get donations, and we bill insurance companies for transport. But I am concerned, and I'm concerned that we're gonna build this building, but we've got the cart before the horse. You don't have the manpower. You can have the best ambulance, the best fire truck, the best law enforcement vehicles. If you don't have the manpower, you have nothing. And a community is its school, its law enforcement, its ambulance service, and its fire department. That's what makes up your community. So I guess the end of my question is there a way to negotiate some of the TED district monies, a portion of that to go back into those emergency services and the school district? Thank you for your time.
Yes, I can answer at least part of your question. So the Montana legislature says you can remit, the word I use is remit, a portion of the funds that you don't need. Okay, so the first assumption is there's going to be some money you don't need. And that money, though, can't all go to the schools. It has to be divided according to in proportion to the mills that are levied. So you're pointing out 62%. So for every dollar that you remit, 62 cents would go for the schools, and 30 cents would go to the other taxing jurisdictions. So that's the answer to your first question. The second is, in the last legislature, the 2017, I believe, there was a court case in Anaconda that drove this. You cannot use the money in the school, if it gets a remittance, can only use it to offset property taxes. It cannot use it for the building funds or anything of that nature. It only can offset. So let me tell you a story. In Ramsey, several years ago, Butte-Silver Bow County remitted portion of the tax increment to the Ramsey School District. Everyone was happy. The taxes went down, and the next year they couldn't remit anything because the next year the property owners had protested their taxes, and so there wasn't enough money to pay the bond. So they couldn't remit any portion in the next year. So what did they have to do? The voters had to pay more taxes again. So everybody had whiplash. So what I'm trying to tell you is you can't just remit a portion without understanding that money, the tax increment, has been pledged to pay for certain things. if it's pledged to a bond, if it's pledged to a, so if in fact they got $100,000 in taxes from the increment, that would be pledged to pay for the sewer system through a debt. You can't, and let's say you're collecting 150,000, so you say, we only need 100,000, we're gonna give 50,000 back to all the other taxing jurisdictions. They can do that. But what if someone protests his or her taxes? They need that extra 50 to make up that loss. So you have to be careful about simply sending money back. Are you following me? Yes, go ahead.
So there would only be one of the 7 members of the TED that protests the taxes that would potentially affect the remitted taxes then?
Correct.
Okay.
That's correct. So, so if one of the 7 members of the property owners decides he or she isn't going to pay taxes that year, is protesting.
Okay.
That money, as you know better than I, gets set aside. They have to pay it, and then it goes into an escrow of some sort. The tax increment district doesn't have access to that money. So if they have a bond payment due for the sewer system, that money's not available. So the bond council always requires that you have in reserve at least 1 or 2 years, depending on the project, of reserve. So you can't simply say, oh, we have some extra money, we're going to give it to the schools. The schools can take it, but they can only use it to lower taxes. They can't add to it. And then the next year, a property tax owner says, wait, my bill last year went down for schools and this year it's going back up. So there's a political cost of doing that as well. I hope that explains. It's not that complicated. It's just sometimes harder to explain than it needs to be. But it's just, you have to have enough money in the bank in order to fulfill your obligations. I'm hoping we're not taking too much time in all this, Commissioner. Okay.
Any other public comment? Okay, we will close the public hearing and open the decision to adopt a resolution to create the Broadwater County Woodland Area Zoning District and Regulation.
All right, Mr. Chairman, I'll make the motion. I move to approve the resolution to intent to adopt the Broadwater County Wheatland Area Zoning District and the Broadwater County Wheatland Area Zoning Regulation pursuant to MCA 762201.
And I will second the motion.
Motion's been made and seconded. Is there any further discussion? I would like to make one comment. The issue here is not today and tomorrow, the issue is the future. The problem that the state has and the problem that counties are gonna have is that next year Colstrip 1 and 2 are shutting down. That's a $25 million hit to the state budget. The first thing that's gonna happen when the legislature convenes is they're gonna come after entitlements. Entitlements is what we fund public safety with. 5 years after that, 3 and 4 are shutting down. This county gets $750,000 a year from transmission line taxes. My guess is I don't know where that money's gonna get replaced at. And if we as a county don't try to attract more businesses, to set a better solid tax base, our taxes are gonna have to come from residents. And we're gonna end up being, you talk about the mill levy for Gallatin County, a mill in Gallatin County is like $213,000. A mill in Broadwater County is $17,000. And the problem with Colstrip shuts down and we don't have any replace for that income, we're gonna have to cut services that we're already at the bare bones we're at right now. I mean, I realize it's 7, 8, 10 years down the road, but at least with this, in 10 years, we have an influx of money coming in. If we don't do this, and we just allow, say Bridger Brewery comes in and builds their plant, but nobody else comes in, then that growth is very, very slow. Look at the growth we've seen down there, it's basically nil. If Bridger Brewery comes in and establishes the sewer system and water, there's other investors that are looking at that to move in there at a much quicker rate. But if we sit there and don't do anything, then it's gonna be really slow. And as far as us pushing it to the south end of the county because we don't want it here, that's the ideal location, simply because of the location of the interstate. If we want a Bridger Brewing here, they gotta truck everything back to the interstate. Their location is what's pushing that. And it's not, in reality, Broadwater County does not see a whole lot of this money because the majority of it goes to the Three Forks School District. A majority of the tax money goes to the fire district. So Broadwater County in the general fund, I mean, we're not gonna see a whole bunch of that money because it all goes to different districts. I mean, we're gonna see some, but it's not gonna be the huge increase that, I mean, the Broadwater Schools is in the same situation as the Three Forks School. But Broadwater School is not gonna see an increase because of this TED. I mean, and that's where we're at. I mean, the thing is, we're not looking at today, we're trying to look at tomorrow, and to me, tomorrow is not looking very good unless we do something with how we're gonna replace the income from Colstrip. This is one way for Broadwater County to address that. Maybe it's a little bit further down the road, but it's not that far down the road before the two of them are gonna collide, and that's gonna be a huge problem for residents and counties and everything else. And that's really all I've got to say about it, so I guess we can, if there's no other comments, we will call for a vote. All in favor? Aye. Opposed, same. Motion carries. Now we will, we'll close the commission meeting, go back to a public hearing to provisional adoption of the ordinance to create the Broadwater County Wheatland Targeted Economic Development District and Comprehensive Development Plan. We need to read this whole thing.
No,
No,
no.
the audience votes
I would say maybe just the therefore. Just the, I would say just the title, paragraph right here, and the therefore be it resolved.
An ordinance designating the Broadwater County Wheatland Targeted Economic Development Area, creating the Broadwater County Wheatland Targeted Economic Development District, and adopting the Broadwater County Wheatland Targeted Economic Development District Comprehensive Development Plan with a tax increment financing provision pursuant to Title VII, Chapter 15, Part 42 and 43 of the Montana Code annotated.
I think it's on the first page, but I would suggest just this part, not all the numbers, it's up to you guys.
Now therefore be it ordained by the Broadwater County, by the Board of County Commissioners, the Commission of Broadwater County, as follows. Pursuant to 7/15/4279 MCA, a local government may by ordinance and following a public hearing authorize the creation of a TED in support of value-adding economic development projects for the purpose of the development of infrastructure to encourage the location and retention of value-adding projects in the state. The county has had prepared a statement of infrastructure deficiencies to provide the necessary foundation upon which to establish a TED to foster secondary value-adding economic development in an industrial commercial area of the CDP. The county has found pursuant to resolution number 2019-4, the creation of a TED for the purpose of addressing infrastructure deficiencies in the area to encourage the location, growth, and retention of secondary value-adding industries to be necessary in the interest of public health, safety, or welfare of the residents of Broadwater County, and would enable Broadwater County to better manage the goals and objectives of the 2003 Broadwater County Growth Policy Plan, the Growth Plan. The Broadwater County Wheatland Targeted Economic Development District, the Wheatland TED, encompasses about 325 acres and is located along US Highway 287 just north of Interstate 90, Highway 287 intersection. The boundaries include portions of sections 1516 Township 2 North, Range 1 East, Broadwater County, Montana. About 2/3 of the acreage is located on the east side of US Highway 287. A strip comprised of less than 100 acres is located along the west side of US Highway 287 and extends from I-90 north to Wheatland Road. Pursuant to 715, 4212, and 4279 MCA, the county has caused a comprehensive development plan to be prepared to enable the county to use increment financing as development plan to be prepared to as a tool to foster targeted economic development and help fund the supportive public infrastructure for the growth of infrastructure intensive secondary value-adding economic development in the industrial commercial area of the CDP. The Montana Department of Revenue will certify the base taxable value of a newly created TED if the department determines that the information required in Montana Administrative Rule 4219-1404 exists and has been provided to the department by the local government that has created the TED when it notifies the department that the TED has been created. The county notified the department of its intent to create the Wheatland TED prior to August 1st, 2019. Any public comment? Yes.
I have several questions, so bear with me. If the TED is adopted, how long will it take the revenues from Bridger Brewing to be able to pay you residents' homes? How many years approximately?
So that's a hard question to answer. Okay, and it wouldn't be to pay me, it would be to reimburse Broadwater County. I've already been paid by MBAC.
Oh, okay, so it would be to pay MBAC then, correct?
Right, correct. That's
Okay.
correct,
Okay.
yes. And so the answer to your question is it's unknown, because we don't know how much increment's actually gonna be collected. So, and how much the cost of the sewer system would be. So the way it's worded is if there's increment available beyond that, then MBAC would be reimbursed.
So the first revenues from this would go to pay for the sewer system, and then it would go to MBAC after that?
That's my understanding. I don't have the copy of the memorandum of understanding here. I neglected to include that in my pile here,
You're
but,
fine, I'm just curious.
yeah.
Is it possible for Bridger Brewing to obtain a wastewater permit where the location is without the huge infrastructure?
I don't know the answer to that question. The only thing I know that, and again, that's not my area of expertise.
Right.
Okay,
Right,
but
it's a question.
it is my understanding that they could build a temporary sewer system, but that it would not be sufficient it would have to be, the system that is required is going to be paid for through a combination of, the tax income is only gonna be paying a portion of it. In the long term, there's gonna have to be a sewer and water district created that would support that, for the maintenance. I know there's efforts to put together a combination of funds. So, that question could be directed towards Bridger Brewing or MBAC, to find that out, but my understanding is that the tax increment is just a piece of that.
So say the TED didn't go into place, Bridger Brewing wouldn't be able to exist without the huge infrastructure. They couldn't get a standard septic permit.
That's my understanding, unless the sewer and water district were to be much larger than what's anticipated.
Right. So commissioners, have you considered a water and sewer district instead, and just, having the districts even serve Old Town residents, because they have problems also?
Well, here's one of the unique things about this. It will be a separate district at this point. Anybody outside the TED could possibly ask to be a user of the district.
Okay, so if the TED doesn't exist, I guess I'm just asking in general, infrastructure, like, you could go create a water and sewer district without the TED, Is that something you've thought about, considered
How would you pay for it?
from the people that join in on it? I know that it takes a considerable amount of money to build the water and sewer district before you can even start bringing in. And so, you know, like a rural improvement district, a water and sewer district, anything outside of the TED itself, just other options.
Sure could be.
Have those been considered at all?
I can answer at least part of that.
Okay,
Yes, that the cost would be prohibitive for it to be the sewer and water district. It's always been conceived of that it would be a partnership between the tax increment financing and the water and sewer district. And the incentive for the property owners to buy into that district has been that it would be less because of the TED. Not, so that the cost of just doing the district would be prohibitive.
so if it's only Bridger Brewing that comes in, there's a good chance that the water and sewer district will never be achieved because they will not have enough tax revenue to pay for it.
I don't believe that's true.
I don't believe that's true.
Okay, so that's a good question, that's why
I
I'm like,
believe the way it's structured right now, that if Bridger Brewery was the only tenant,
yeah,
that their tax revenue would pay for that infrastructure.
for the whole water and sewer district,
Yes.
okay.
Yeah.
That answers my question,
Okay.
That's how it's structured right now.
okay.
If other tenants come in, if we're successful, then they
The
will,
more the
then
merrier.
they'll contribute, yeah.
Yep, okay.
And there will be a separate water sewer
Mhm.
district board
Yep.
that manages that. It won't be part of the county.
Right. Just another taxing district, much like the school, fire, all the
Yep.
other things, okay. So, this is kind of funny, and I've been to meetings with you commissioners about the bridges before. I'm pretty familiar with how all that goes and what's kind of a place you're in. I commend you for the economic development of your county, it's tough. I just have a request regarding the Old Town bridges. If there is a possibility for you to take some of that tax increment financing and put it toward your half of the Old Town bridges, that would be fantastic for everybody's sake. For the schools, I mean, we're putting miles on our buses and just depreciating them much faster. If we could just get across those bridges, those kids could be home sooner. And emergency services could use them, fire could use them with lower response times. If there was a bad wreck on 287 and it got blocked, that's a huge public risk, safety, all those things. They don't technically have the ability to go over those bridges. You'd be driving through fields and taking out fences, which, yeah, you gotta do what you gotta do, but, please consider that in, of your discussions. And also, please consider meeting with the school board to talk about different possibilities of still supporting your school and the community. I don't know anybody that would want to move to an area to go to work for somebody if their school was failing, if their fire couldn't get to them, if they didn't have any police services. I wouldn't want to go there. You look at Helena, Helena's booming because their schools are amazing. There's jobs everywhere. Everybody wants to go to Helena right now. I don't know, not so much Bozeman because nobody can afford it, but, just please consider making a good foundation before you just build a straw bale house on top of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other public comment?
I'll speak for 2 more minutes. Sorry. Sean Gifford. I just say as, I get it, I get the position you're in. Our coffers aren't exactly spilling over in Three Forks. And what you guys are gonna be asking us to do the next 15 years is help subsidize the growth. And I get it. I just hope we can still afford to pay for emergency services going forward. And there's not gonna be a break of service for Broadwater County residents. As the mayor of Three Forks, that's my concern. And hopefully you guys take that in consideration moving forward. Thank you.
Any other public comment?
Yeah, I had a question. So are you voting on the TED today, then,
Yes.
like you did with the district? So I thought you said it was
It's
in
just,
2 weeks and
it's
then
an
that's it.
intent,
So you vote on establish them before you
It's
have the
provisional,
public comment?
it's provisional,
It's
so we
provisional?
have a 30-day comment period, so November 18th, we will all meet again, and then we will decide whether we go forward.
Okay, so do I need to reiterate what I said earlier, or will that go for the whole meeting then with this too? Okay. I had one more question, but I forgot, so, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Brandon Harrison, the undersheriff. Just a couple questions, because I've been to a lot of these meetings. I've heard two different things. That Bridger Brewing is coming whether this TED happens or not, and then now that Bridger Brewing is not coming unless this TED happens, and I guess I'd just like to clarify that first.
I don't know that. That's up to Bridger Brewing,
Okay.
in my mind.
So,
I mean,
the other thing I'd like to have you guys keep in mind when you make your decision is that you know our situation down there. Everybody here knows it. It's nothing to be proud of on a law enforcement standpoint. And nor do I want you to make this decision based on controlling what people do on their property. My concern is the amphitheater and how many people that's gonna bring to our county and how we're gonna provide a law enforcement service to that.
I can answer that question for you.
Okay.
It's my understanding that they will provide all their own,
Law enforcement?
all their own security.
Security.
And I can't remember the name of the firm they use, but it's a pretty reputable firm
Okay.
that does these types of events to minimize that impact for our local law. So, I don't know all the details.
That's fine, that
but
answers some of my
what I
concerns,
heard.
whether we could set maybe like a county ordinance that, a certain size event has to afford security, or a law enforcement, especially with alcohol sales and things like that.
Sure.
My other concern is, and maybe something I wanna clear up with some of these fine folks from that area, is we did add a deputy down to the Three Forks area. He's gonna live there. His house is almost done. That position isn't a new position. It was created on sacrificing our detective position. So we're cutting back on what we're able to do on some felony investigations to have that job. However, what has happened this year with the increase of the cost for law enforcement, fuel, all those types of things, and then the cost of living increase, which all of our people deserved what they got, and could have been a little bit more. However, we had to cut back due to some mistakes and things that we found in our budget, and we had to cut roughly $20,000 out of a deputy sheriff. So with that, he's not going to be able to be down there as much as we thought. And I know you guys already know this, I've discussed this with you. And my concern is adding another business. Every single business in that district has been victimized from some sort of crime several times through my past 15 years here due to the lack of law enforcement. And I just want you guys to take that into consideration, probably more so than the city of Townsend and businesses here, just because there's never anybody down there. And just some of my concerns that I wanted to address and let these people know that we're trying, but I think that obviously we'll probably have to come down to a mill levy for public safety to do that. So, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Brandon.
Thanks, Brandon.
Thanks.
All right, I kind of want to step aside from Bridger Brewing. What other companies have petitioned coming in there? No idea. I know Fubar Holdings has been petitioning to come into Three Forks as well, and they've got the second largest chunk of that section of highway. So they haven't presented anything that they want to do in that section of highway that would apply to this TED or anything else.
Not that I'm aware.
I have no idea.
So if this zone is now zoned completely commercial,
Industrial.
Industrial.
It's,
So
with an
does that-
emphasis on industrial.
so no residential, no multi-unit apartment complex, work,
Correct.
live. I heard the mention of, you know, a caretaker site. Does that include work, live facilities? Like, so if they did the industrial shop underneath, apartment upstairs, is that
No,
zoned
no, that's,
industrial?
it's not, it's, the Montana law is pretty clear on the kind of zoning that can occur in an area like this. And it is, I'm all for work-live, that's a great concept, but it's allowed in urban renewal districts, but not in targeted economic development districts. You wanna, because of conflicts between the work and live situations, residential situations, the state has not allowed that to occur. However, housing can occur adjacent to that, just, right outside the boundary of the district.
Okay, and so the current housing that's in that area is gonna be grandfathered in?
Correct,
The chickens and all?
correct,
Industrial chickens,
Yeah.
awesome.
right.
Okay, I mean, I guess I don't see, and I know it was mentioned earlier, Bridger Brewing wanting to be there right there because they're by I-90. Do you know where Bridger Brewing is currently located with their production facility?
No.
They are literally right across the street from the college.
Okay.
They're in the college complex. They produce, they ship, they can, and it goes everywhere. So the primary of this, I don't believe, is to expand brewing altogether, is to put in an amphitheater and generate that revenue, to turn comparative to the Kettle House. You know, that's the targeted conversation. So when we talk about the security on site, that's not as big a concern. Again, when we start talking first responders and law enforcement, just like Rockin' the Rivers, just like Country Jam, it's the head-on collision in the canyon. It's everybody who decides to take a back road home because they gotta get back to Bozeman, and they either decide to try and cut down through Norris and do the giant loop, or try and take a frontage road through Manhattan and everybody else, down Old Town Road, into, off of, and through that entire bridge section and everything else. So I understand it's gonna happen. Once it is zoned, once the TED's generated, TED only exists for this industry. It can't be rezoned after it's already a TED.
So, if I understand your question right, at the end of the TED's period,
I'm talking during the TED.
so we have to actually, and I think we've all been using terms interchangeably, and I've been as guilty of that. It's a tax increment provision that only lasts 15 years.
Yes.
Or 20, or 40 if you add the 25. The TED can continue to exist, and use other financial tools. As long as that area is a TED, the zoning cannot change.
Okay, so it can only be industrial.
Industrial,
while
commercial,
zoned
right.
Within the TED.
That's correct. If the TED, if the county disbands the tax increment provision runs out, the county decides it no longer wants to have that district, then it can rezone it if it does. But there's one other thing that we haven't talked about. The TED can establish a revolving loan fund with tax increment money, that's available. And then that can continue for as long as the county wants to do it. You wouldn't get any more money into the fund after the 15 years. But that money can continue to rotate, revolve in and out to help other businesses. Then it would have to stay zoned as it is.
As a TED.
But once all that was done, then it could be, the county could choose to rezone that area. But it would have to be based on the growth policy, as this gentleman pointed out very well. And it has to be, there has to be a basis for that decision more than just, we want it to go back. It has to
I'm
be
not saying go back, I'm just go sideways.
correct and go.
Go from industrial, we wanted industrial to bring this guy in. Okay, we got our sewer, we got it industrial. Oh, but now we'd rather bring this business in because it's more profitable. And now we're just gonna rezone it again to bring in that because
Yeah, I mean, the
there's-
zone is pretty
there's a
wide
history
open.
with a couple of the people that own property.
Yeah.
And Fubar Holdings is one of them. They're not industrial holding agents.
I think there's a specific list, Janet, that lists out.
That lists all the types of businesses that can
Yes.
be, and that's in the
'Cause that's-
regulation.
That's on that, I can't remember the right wording, but because it's on state highway, blah, 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 industrial piece, which is the same piece they bought into in the city of Three Forks and tried to get rezoned into